WTC Machinery is proud to introduce the CG4 Grouser Welder. This part of the video covers operating the CG4 Grouser Welder. Re-GROUSERING track pads. The goal in rebuilding track pads is to restore worn grouser cleats to their original dimension using replacement grouser stock. There are 3 steps in this process, and the CG4 Grouser Welder has a separate station for each step. The first step happens at the CG4's leftmost, or number 1, station. This is where the torch carriage cuts off the track pad's worn grouser cleat, leaving a smooth, level face for the grouser stock. In the second step, done at the CG4's middle, or number 2, station, the track pad and replacement grouser stock are clamped together, and the weld carriage welds one side of the joint between them. The third step finishes welding the grouser stock on the other side at the CG4's rightmost, or number 3, station. Practice the following steps with 1 or 2 scrap track pads to become familiar with the controls and develop some skill. Required tools and supplies. You'll need a few tools to operate the CG4 Grouser Welder safely. At minimum, you should have a face shield or other eye protection for use while flame cutting, a pair of heavy gloves for handling hot track pads, an igniter to light the cutting torch flame, a cleaning set for the cutting torch tip, a chipping hammer and wire brush to remove weld slag, wire cutters to trim the welding wire, a tape measure to check track pad dimensions, and a set of inch series hex keys or Allen wrenches and open end wrenches for machine adjustments. And lastly, a 7/16 inch nut driver. After selecting the replacement grouser bar, cut the bar to length. Generally, the grouser bar is 1 to 2 inches, or 25 to 50 millimeters, shorter than the track pad and has a bevel or clip at each end. Finally, you'll need welding wire and flux to run the CG4. WTC Machinery can supply this directly. Preparing the CG4 cutting station, leftmost or number 1 station. Fill the slag pan under the leftmost station with water to a depth of about 1 to 2 inches, 25 to 50 millimeters. This will trap sparks and molten slag created when flame cutting. Place the welding wire spool on the wire reel holder so the end of the wire uncoils downward towards the wire feed and lock it in place. Loosen the clamp nut, move it and the clamp spring out of the way, and swing the latch plate open. Straighten the first 12 to 18 inches, 300 to 450 millimeters of the welding wire and remove any burrs from its end. Pass the end of the welding wire through the wire straightener, past the drive and pressure rolls, and down through the torch pipe. Swing the latch plate back up, meshing the pressure and drive rolls, and push the clamp bolt and clamp spring back into position. Tighten the hex nut until it begins to compress the clamp spring, and then turn it 5 more full turns. Finally, fill the flux hopper with flux. Now we'll cut off a worn grouser cleat. Move to the number 1 leftmost station and retract the clamping cylinders by pressing on the far end of the foot pedal. Pick up a track pad with the hoist so the grouser cleat is near the top of the pad and facing forward. Lower the track pad onto the number 1 station, centered on the station. Press the near end of the foot pedal to clamp the track pad. Check that the pad and grouser cleat are level. If not, retract the cylinders, adjust the stop bolts, and re-clamp the track pad. Move the left, right, off switch to the right position and adjust the speed control to get the proper cutting speed for the track pad. This depends on how thick the grouser cleat is. Once the speed is set, move the carriage so that the torch tip is even with the left edge of the grouser cleat, and adjust the torch to get the right gap between the tip and the grouser cleat, and between the cutting tip and the face of the track pad. The best gap depends on how large the grouser cleat is and how badly worn the cleat is. Open the fuel valve of the cutting torch and light the flame. Adjust the fuel and preheat oxygen valves to get a proper flame for the size of the grouser cleat. Preheat the grouser cleat and, when ready for cutting, open the cutting oxygen valve and at the same time move the left off right switch to the right position. Adjust the speed control to get a smooth cut on the track pad. When the cut is complete, Pull down on the disengagement handle and push the torch carriage to the left end of the number 1 station, ready for the next track pad. Turn the left off-right switch off and turn off the cutting torch valves. The cutting oxygen valve first, the fuel valve second, and finally the preheat oxygen valve. Move to the number 2 station in the middle of the CG4 and press the near end of the foot pedal to retract the clamping cylinder. Choose a tooling bar to match the Grouser stock you are using. Thread in the 3 tooling bar studs and install it on the CG4. Press the far end of the foot pedal to extend the clamping cylinder and add shims between the tooling bar and the CG4 frame so the gap left is about 1/4 inch or 6 millimeters, less than the thickness of the trim track pad and Grouser stock. Tighten the 3 nuts to lock the tooling bar and retract the clamping cylinder. Use the air hoist to lift the pad, move it to the number 2 station, center it on the station, and lower it down onto the 2 bottom rests. Put a piece of Grouser bar stock in the tooling bar and turn the 2 height adjusters to raise or lower the track pad until the trimmed stub of the track pad's Grouser cleat centers on the Grouser bar. Press the front edge of the station number 2 foot pedal to extend the clamping cylinder, clamping the track pad and Grouser stock. Check the clamping force. Tap the track pad with a hammer or other object. If it moves, unclamp and add another 1/8 to 1/4 inch, 3 to 6 millimeter, thick shim behind the tooling bar. Now let's position the torch at station number 2. Raise or lower the welding torch so the tip is about 1 inch or 25 millimeters above the top of the Grouser bar. Adjust the oscillator holder, threaded rod, or the horizontal adjustment so the torch tip is centered front to back on the gap between the Grouser bar and track pad. Pull down on the welding carriage's disengagement handle and move the carriage until the welding torch is above the left edge of the track pad. There are 3 templates: Stop Oscillate, Start Oscillate, and Weld Stop for the number 2 station. They control when the weld starts and stops and when the weld oscillates or weaves at the beginning and end of each weld. First, disengage the welding carriage and roll it until the weld head is approximately 1 inch or 25 millimeters inside of the left edge of the track pad. Loosen the lock bolt on the far left, the left Stop Oscillate template, and slide it until it touches the top template pickup string and retighten the lock bolt. Now, disengage the welding carriage and roll it until the weld head is approximately 1 inch or 25 millimeters inside of the right edge of the track pad. Loosen the lock bolt on the bottom, the Start Oscillate template, slide it until it touches the bottom template pickup spring, and retighten the lock bolt. And finally, disengage the welding carriage and roll it until the weld head is above the right edge of the track pad. Move the last template, the Weld Stop, until it touches the middle template pickup spring and tighten the lock bolt. Next, we'll set the oscillator width. Turn on the welding power supply and turn the weld carriage power switch on. Move the oscillator auto off run switch to the run position and turn the oscillate speed control clockwise to start the oscillator motor turning. Notice how far the torch moves compared to the gap between the track pad and Grouser stock. Move the oscillator auto off run switch back to the off position. If the torch doesn't cover the entire width of the gap or goes past the edges of the gap, loosen the lock knob and turn the width adjustment knob. Retest until the welding torch moves back and forth across the entire gap and then retighten the lock knob. Next, we'll start and adjust the weld. Before welding, do a test pass of the number 2 station. Turn the welding power supply and power switch on. Set the oscillate auto off run and weld carriage auto off run switches to auto. Set the weld carriage left off right switch to right. Set the wire feed up off down switch to off. Set the oscillate speed control to 3. Set the oscillate travel control to 5. Set the stringer travel control to 5. And press the Weld Start button. Follow the weld carriage through the test pass. Adjust the template locations and oscillator width if needed. Move the welding carriage left again until the welding torch is even with the left edge of the track pad, and now set the controls for welding. Set the wire feed up, off, down switch to down. Set the voltage and the wire feed rate controls to 5. Open the flux valve under the flux hopper and press the weld start button. Once welding starts, adjust the voltage control until the voltage meter reads between 28 and 32 volts and complete the weld. Next, we'll take a look at some welding adjustments. The ideal weld bead should completely fill the groove between the Grouser bar and the track pad, with a smooth surface that extends slightly above the top of the Grouser bar. 3 things affect the quality of the weld: voltage, wire speed, and travel speed. Low voltage gives a peaked weld bead, while voltage set too high can give a weld bead with a concave center. Generally, set the voltage between 28 and 32 volts for small and medium track pads, and slightly higher on large track pads. Wire speed. Set by the wire feed rate control, this is the speed of the welding wire and the amperage of the weld. Along with the travel speed, this affects the size of the weld bead and its penetration, how well the weld bead, track pad, and Grouser stock bond together. Travel speed. Set by the stringer travel and oscillate travel controls, this is how fast the torch moves while welding. The size of the weld bead is the best guide to proper travel speed. Bead profile. The bead profile, the shape and size of the weld bead, is a good way to judge the quality of the weld. The ideal weld bead has a slightly oval cross-section and fills the gap between the track pad and Grouser stock gap. This is the result of the correct balance of voltage, wire speed, and travel speed, and has the highest strength. A peaked bead, or cool weld, has a high center and is caused by low voltage, low wire speed, or high travel speed. An undercut bead, hot weld, sinks down in the center. The weld can also flow off the edges of the track pad or melt through the gap between the track pad and Grouser stock. This is caused by high voltage, high wire speed, or a slow travel speed. Continue welding while adjusting the voltage, wire speed, and travel speed to get the desired weld. One note: always trim the end of the welding wire before starting a new weld, and always shut off the flux valve at the end of each weld. Now let's move to station number 3. Press the near end of the foot pedal to retract the station number 3 clamping cylinder. Lift the track pad using the air hoist. Flip the track pad so that the Grouser cleat is at the bottom and lower it into the center of station number 3. Hold the front of the Grouser bar against the adjustable stop and check the spacing between the welding torch tip and the gap between the track pad and the Grouser stock. Adjust the bottom screws and add or remove shims from behind the adjustable stop so that the gap matches the spacing in station number 2. In other words, the welding torch can keep the same front to back and height adjustments as in station number 2. Once the adjustments are made, tighten the 3 adjustable stop nuts. Press the far end of the foot pedal to clamp the track pad and adjust the back stop screw to level the track pad. Move the welding carriage close to the left end of the track pad and adjust the 3 templates the same way as for station number 2. Again, do a test pass before welding and then proceed with welding. Remember the importance of keeping the CG4 Grouser welder clean. Flux dust is very abrasive and can cause serious and expensive wear to welder parts. Except for the sections we'll discuss later, never grease parts of the CG4. Dry lubricants can be used sparingly, but some of these, like graphite powder, are electrical conductors. Keep them away from the electrical insulators on the welder torch and wire feeder. Inspect the torch head for burnt or worn components. Especially important are the A0141 welding tip and the A2514 insulator bushing. A worn welding tip allows the welding wire to move sideways, leading to a wandering weld bead, and a badly worn tip loses contact with the welding wire, stopping the weld. A burned insulator bushing can allow the flux nozzle to become loose or fail to insulate the welding tip. Always replace worn welding tips. At least once every month, Inspect the rubber flux hose connecting the flux hopper to the flux nozzle. Look for leaks, kinks, burn spots, or cracks. Replace damaged hoses. The CG4 has 6 grease points under the station number 2 guard. Every 6 months, remove the guard, blow away any dust with low pressure compressed air, and top off the grease fittings with good quality grease, wipe off any excess, and replace the guard. Regularly inspect the air hoist following the manufacturer's recommendations. Bottom Line Productions, where our focus
and action
is your bottom line.